Every year on the same day I met my lover, hiding this secret from my husband. But then one day, something unexpected turned my world upside down, changing everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and betrayal. It sounds dull, a married woman meeting a man in a coffee shop, but that day sparked an affair that would consume me for decades, challenging every belief I had about faithfulness. Chapter 1. A faithful married woman meets a man in a coffee shop. I know it sounds dull, but, life has a funny way of throwing surprises at you. You think you've got it all figured out, settled into your comfortable routines, and then, out of nowhere, something, or someone, comes along and turns it all on its head. It was my 5th wedding anniversary, and there I was, sitting alone in a quaint little coffee shop in the heart of town. I know what you're thinking, a coffee shop of all places. But trust me, there was something about this place. It had this old-world charm, with mismatched furniture and a bell that jingled every time someone walked in. My husband, Michael, he's a good man, but always caught up in work. That day, he was away on another business trip, and there I was, sipping my cappuccino, staring out of the window, lost in thoughts. 5 years of marriage, and it already felt like a lifetime. The coffee shop was buzzing with life, but in my little corner, it felt like time stood still. I was about to delve into my book when he walked in. You know the type, tall, dark, and intriguing. He had this air about him, confident yet mysterious. He ordered a coffee and sat at the table right across from me. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and I quickly looked away, feeling this unexpected flutter in my stomach. I tried to focus on my book, but my mind kept drifting back to the stranger. There was something about him that felt exciting, different from the mundanity of my everyday life. He caught me stealing glances at him, and that's when he did something unexpected. He smiled, a warm, inviting smile, and asked, "Is the book any good?" His voice, it was like a melody, smooth and captivating. We started talking, and it felt like we'd known each other for ages. He introduced himself as James. He was an artist, a traveller, someone who lived life on his terms. The way he spoke about his adventures, his passions, it was mesmerising. We talked about everything and nothing, from our favourite books to our dreams and regrets. I opened up about my life, my stable yet unexciting marriage, my longing for something more. It was like he understood me, saw right through me. It was thrilling and terrifying at the same time. The hours flew by, and before we knew it, the coffee shop was closing. We stepped outside into the chilly evening air, and that's when he said, "I'm in town every year around this time. Would you like to meet again, same day, next year?" It was crazy, the idea of meeting a stranger once a year. But something inside me screamed yes. So I nodded, feeling a mix of guilt and excitement. We parted ways with a promise to meet again, no strings attached, no expectations. As I walked home, the weight of what I'd just agreed to started to sink in. What was I doing? I was a married woman, for heaven's sake. But the thought of seeing James again, it was like a spark in my otherwise dull life. I got home to an empty house, and as I lay in bed that night, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Guilt, excitement, confusion. I told myself it was just a harmless encounter, a break from reality. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. I had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. So here I am, a year later, counting down the days until I see him again. It sounds dull, meeting a man in a coffee shop, but believe me, it's anything but. It's my little secret, my escape from the ordinary. And as much as I try to deny it, I can't help but wonder, what if? And that, my dear listener, is where my story begins. In that coffee shop, with a stranger who unknowingly turned my life upside down. What happens next? Well, you'll just have to wait and see. But I promise you, it's going to be anything but dull. This is chapter 1 of a 6-part short story. If you don't have time to watch or listen to all 6 chapters right now, why not subscribe to the Romance Diaries on YouTube and check back later, or simply stay tuned for chapter 2. My dull marriage brought into sharp focus as I dream of another man. Trapped in a dull marriage, my secret yearning for another man grew with each passing day, blurring the lines between loyalty and desire, and leading me down a path I never imagined. Chapter 2. My dull marriage brought into sharp focus as I dream of another man. Life, you see, is a peculiar mix of realities and fantasies. And sometimes the line between the two becomes so blurred that you find yourself lost in a maze of emotions, unable to distinguish your dreams from your waking moments. That's exactly where I found myself after meeting James in that coffee shop. The year that followed was like a slow burning flame, igniting a fire within me that I never knew existed. My days were filled with the usual routines. Waking up next to Michael, my husband, going about our daily chores, sharing meals in silence. But my nights were consumed with thoughts of James. Michael, bless him, he tried. He noticed the change in me. Sometimes he'd catch me smiling at my phone, lost in memories of that day. "What's making you smile, love?" he'd ask, and I'd brush it off with a vague response. How could I tell him that I was thinking of another man, a man who had become my secret fantasy? Our marriage, it wasn't bad, you know. Michael was dependable, caring, a good man. But somewhere along the way, our marriage had lost its spark. We had become more like roommates, sharing a life but not really living it together. The passion, the excitement, the thrill, it had all fizzled out. And then there was James. He represented everything my life lacked: adventure, passion, mystery. I'd find myself daydreaming about our conversations, his laugh, the way his eyes lit up when he talked about his travels. It was like a movie playing in my head, over and over, and I was the star of my own romantic adventure. As the months passed, the anticipation of meeting him again grew stronger. I marked the calendar, counting down the days. It felt like a lifeline, something to look forward to amidst my mundane existence. But with the anticipation came the guilt. I was a married woman after all. I shouldn't be feeling this way about another man. I loved Michael, or at least, I thought I did. But James, he stirred something in me that I couldn't ignore. It was a chilly evening in November, a year after our first meeting. Michael was away again, and I was alone with my thoughts. The house felt empty, and I longed for something, anything to fill the void. That's when I decided to take a walk, clear my head. As I walked through the streets, the crisp air biting at my cheeks, I replayed that day with James in my mind. It was like a beacon of light in my otherwise grey world. And then, the realization hit me. I was looking forward to seeing him more than anything else in my life. Was this what I had become? A woman who longed for a man who wasn't her husband? The next day, as I prepared to meet James, I felt a mix of excitement and fear. What if he didn't show up? What if last year was just a fleeting moment, never to be repeated? But deep down, I knew he'd be there. He had to be. I arrived at the coffee shop early, the same one where we had met. It was bustling with activity, but all I could think about was seeing him again. And then, there he was, walking through the door, looking just as captivating as I remembered. Our eyes met, and it was like no time had passed. The conversation flowed easily, picking up right where we had left off. He told me about his travels, the places he'd seen, the people he'd met. and I listened, captivated by every word. But as we talked, I couldn't shake off the feeling of guilt. Here I was, a married woman sitting across from a man who wasn't my husband, feeling things I shouldn't be feeling. It was like living a double life, and the weight of it was starting to bear down on me. As we parted ways that day, James said something that sent shivers down my spine. "Ellie, I think about you more often than I should. There's something about you that I can't quite shake off." His words echoed in my head as I walked home. What was I doing? Was I willing to risk everything for this man, this fantasy? My heart said yes, but my mind screamed no. That night, as I lay in bed next to Michael, I realized the gravity of my situation. I was at a crossroads, torn between my commitment to my husband and my undeniable attraction to James. What was I going to do? And just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, I received a text message that changed everything. It was from James, and it read, "I need to see you again. Soon." My heart raced as I read those words. It was a dangerous game we were playing, and I knew I was in too deep. But the thrill of it, the sheer excitement of the forbidden, was too much to resist. So there I was, a faithful married woman dreaming of another man. My life, once so predictable, was now a whirlwind of emotions and desires. And as much as I tried to fight it, I knew deep down that I was about to make a decision that could change everything. This is Chapter 2 of a 6-part short story. If you are enjoying this story, please show us some love by hitting the like button. Please stay tuned for Chapter 3. Our third secret rendezvous reveals mutual lust and a shocking truth. At our third secret rendezvous, mutual lust was overshadowed by a shocking truth, unveiling a web of lies and desires that threatened to unravel everything I thought I knew about love. Chapter 3. Our third secret rendezvous reveals mutual lust and a shocking truth. There's something about forbidden fruit, isn't there? The way it tempts you, whispers promises of sweetness in your ear. That's what James had become to me. My forbidden fruit, tantalizing and out of reach, yet so achingly desirable. The days leading up to our third rendezvous were a blur of anticipation and anxiety. I was like a schoolgirl with a crush, heart fluttering at the mere thought of him. But alongside that excitement, there was a gnawing sense of dread. I was playing with fire, and somewhere deep down, I knew I was bound to get burned. I remember getting ready that day. Michael had left for work, his kiss on my cheek brief and perfunctory. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I couldn't help but wonder who I was doing this for. Was it for James? For myself? Or perhaps for the woman I wished I could be? The coffee shop was our spot, a haven where we could pretend, even if just for a few hours, that we belonged to each other. When I walked in, I saw him there, sitting at our usual table, a vision of the man who haunted my dreams. James stood up as I approached, his smile sending ripples of excitement through me. We ordered our coffees, and as we settled into our seats, the connection between us was palpable, an electric charge in the air. Our conversation started with the usual pleasantries, but there was an undercurrent of something more, a tension that neither of us could ignore. We talked about our lives, our hopes, our regrets. With every word, it felt like we were peeling back layers, getting closer to something raw and real. Then James leaned in, his eyes locking with mine, and said something that took my breath away. "Ellie, I can't stop thinking about you. It's like you've cast a spell on me." His voice was a low whisper, a secret just for the two of us. My heart raced at his confession. It was madness, this connection we had, but it felt so right, so incredibly intense. We were two souls, lost and found in each other, and for a moment I allowed myself to get lost in the fantasy of it all. But then, as we continued to talk, James revealed something that shattered the illusion. He started to open up about his life, his past, and that's when he dropped the bombshell. He was married too. Not just married, but trapped in a loveless, unhappy marriage. I felt like the floor had been pulled out from under me. Here I was, judging myself for betraying Michael, and all along James was doing the same to his wife. It was a revelation that made me see him, and myself, in a new light. The irony wasn't lost on me. Two married people, seeking solace in each other's arms, escaping the realities of their own imperfect lives. It was a twisted kind of symmetry, one that left me feeling both vindicated and more guilty than ever. As we parted that day, the air between us was different. There was still desire, yes, but now it was tinged with the bitter taste of reality. We were no longer just two strangers sharing a connection. We were accomplices in betrayal. I walked home, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. The excitement I had felt earlier was now replaced by a deep, unsettling conflict. I was drawn to James, more now than ever, but the knowledge of his marriage made it all feel so sordid, so wrong. And then there was Michael, my husband, who had no idea about the turmoil I was going through. As I stepped into our home, the familiarity of it all felt like a chokehold. I was living a lie, and it was starting to suffocate me. That night, as I lay in bed next to Michael, I couldn't help but wonder about the woman who lay next to James. What was she like? Did she have any idea about her husband's infidelity? The thought made me sick to my stomach. The following days were a haze. I went through the motions, smiling and nodding when needed. But inside, I was a mess. The thrill of the affair had been replaced by a deep sense of remorse and confusion, and just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, I received another message from James. "I need to see you again. I have something important to tell you." My heart sank. What more was there to reveal? What other secrets lay in wait? I knew I should put an end to this madness, but part of me needed to know, needed to see him one last time. So, there I was, caught in the web of my own desires and deceptions, my dull marriage brought into sharp focus as I dreamt of another man, a man who was just as lost and broken as I was. This is Chapter 3 of a 6-part short story. If you would like to experience your own real-life romance, possibly not exactly like this one, please visit our sponsors in the description below. Stay tuned for Chapter 4. Caught between my husband's growing suspicion and my lover's unrelenting passion, I found myself at a crossroads, facing a decision that could shatter the facade of my seemingly perfect life. Chapter 4. Torn between my husband's suspicion and a lover's passion. Do you know what it's like to live a double life? To wake up every day wearing a mask, playing a part that you know deep down isn't really you? That was my reality, my daily act, the devoted wife at home, and the yearning lover in secret. Each day that passed since my last meeting with James was like a step further into a labyrinth of lies and desire. I was living on the edge of a precipice, constantly fearing the fall, yet unable to step back from the brink. Michael, my husband, he had always been the steady one, the rock in our relationship. But even rocks can sense the shifting sands beneath them. He started asking questions, subtle at first, then more pointed. "You seem distracted, Ellie. Is everything okay?" His eyes would search mine, looking for truths I wasn't ready to give. And then there were the late-night texts from James, each one like a siren call I couldn't resist. We'd exchange messages filled with longing and promises of stolen moments. It was reckless, I knew, but the thrill was intoxicating. James and I continued to meet, each encounter more passionate than the last. It was madness, the way we clung to each other, finding solace in our shared escape from reality. He was like a drug, and I was hopelessly addicted. But with every secret tryst, the weight of my deceit grew heavier. I was living a lie that was slowly suffocating me. The guilt was always there, lurking in the shadows, a constant reminder of the betrayal I was committing. One evening, as I returned home from one such rendezvous, Michael confronted me. "Ellie, we need to talk. I know something's going on." His voice was steady, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. I stood there, frozen, my heart racing. This was it, the moment of truth. But instead of confessing, I found myself weaving another web of lies. "It's just work stress, Michael. I've been really overwhelmed." The words tasted bitter in my mouth. He nodded, but I could tell he wasn't convinced. There was a new distance between us, a chasm that had opened up silently, insidiously. Days turned into weeks, and the strain on my marriage grew. Michael became more withdrawn, and I, more desperate to cling to the fantasy I had with James. It was a vicious cycle, one that I couldn't seem to break free from. And then came the day that changed everything. James sent me a message that sent a shiver down my spine. "We can't go on like this, Ellie. I need more. I want more." His words echoed in my head, a mantra of forbidden desire. I knew it was a turning point, a decision that could alter the course of my life forever. But as much as I wanted to, I couldn't bring myself to end things with James. He had become a part of me, a piece of my soul that I wasn't ready to let go of. So we planned another meeting, a day that promised to be a culmination of all our secret yearnings. But as I prepared to step out, I caught a glimpse of Michael, watching me with a look that was a mix of suspicion and sorrow. The realization hit me like a wave. I was about to lose everything. My husband, my home, my sense of self. All for a love that was built on a foundation of lies. I left the house with a heavy heart, torn between the life I had and the one I thought I wanted. The journey to meet James was a blur, my mind a battleground of emotions. As I sat across from James, the gravity of the situation finally sunk in. This wasn't just an affair. It was a choice that would define the rest of my life. We talked, our conversation a mix of passion and desperation. James was ready to leave his wife, to start a new life together. But as I looked into his eyes, I saw not just the man I desired, but also the reflection of the person I had become. I was lost, caught in a whirlwind of my own making. And as James reached out to me, I realized I couldn't do it. I couldn't be the person who destroyed 2 marriages, 2 lives. The decision was heart-wrenching. I told James it was over, that we couldn't see each other again. The pain in his eyes mirrored my own, but I knew it was the right thing to do. I returned home to Michael, but the house was empty. He had left, taking his belongings with him. There was a note on the table, a simple goodbye that spoke volumes of the hurt and betrayal he felt. I sat there, alone in the silence, the magnitude of my actions crashing down on me. I had lost my husband, ended my affair, and in the process, lost myself. But just when I thought I had reached the end of my story, a new twist emerged. A knock on the door broke the silence, and as I opened it, I was met with a sight that I never expected. It was Michael, his eyes filled with a mix of hope and uncertainty. "Ellie," he said, his voice trembling, "we need to talk." And in that moment, I knew that my story was far from over. It was a new beginning, a chance to mend what I had broken, to find myself again. This is Chapter 4 of a 6-part short story, We would love to know what you think of the story, so please let us have your comments and feedback. Stay tuned for Chapter 5. After years of a secret affair, I made the heart-wrenching decision to leave my husband, only to find myself engulfed in a storm of regret and revelations that questioned everything. Chapter 5. After years of cheating. I finally decided to leave my husband. Sitting alone in the dimly lit living room, the walls around me felt like they were closing in, suffocating me with the weight of my own choices. Michael's return, standing at our doorstep with a mix of hope and pain in his eyes, should have been a relief, but it only served to highlight the tangled web of deceit I had woven around us. You see, the truth has a way of catching up with you, no matter how fast you run. And there I was, face to face with mine. Michael and I sat across from each other, a chasm of unspoken hurt stretching between us. His voice was calm, but his words cut through me like a knife. Ellie, we can't go on like this. I know there's someone else, I've known for a while. His admission struck me, not because it was a surprise, but because of the resigned acceptance in his tone. Tears welled up in my eyes, the dam of my emotions finally breaking. Michael, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. My voice was a mere whisper, a feeble attempt at seeking forgiveness for a betrayal that ran deep. We talked, or rather, I confessed, about James, about our annual meetings, about the emotional turmoil that had been eating away at me. Michael listened, his face an unreadable mask, but his eyes, they were filled with the pain that I had caused. After I had poured out my guilt-ridden heart, the room fell into a heavy silence. I expected anger, accusations, perhaps even a bitter confrontation. But Michael, ever the gentle soul, simply sighed. Ellie, I don't hate you. I'm just disappointed. We lost our way, and I'm not sure if we can find it back. His words were not accusatory, but they stung more than any outburst could have. That night, we decided to sleep in separate rooms, the physical distance a mere reflection of the emotional gulf between us. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized that my affair with James was not just a betrayal of my marriage vows. It was a betrayal of myself, of the woman I once was, the woman I wanted to be. The next morning, I woke up to an empty house. Michael had left early, the note he left behind short and to the point. We need some time apart to think about what we want. I'll stay at a friend's. Those next few days were a blur. I moved through life like a ghost, haunted by the reality of my actions. The Ellie who looked back at me from the mirror was a stranger, her eyes hollow, her spirit broken. It was during those long, lonely hours that a realization began to dawn on me. I couldn't continue living this lie. My marriage, a sham built on years of neglect and infidelity, was suffocating me. And as much as I loved Michael, I knew that love was not enough to bridge the chasm I had created. With a heavy heart, I made the decision. I was going to leave Michael. It was not a choice made out of desire for James, or a longing for the thrill of the affair. It was a decision made in the hope of finding myself again, of rediscovering the Ellie who had gotten lost along the way. I picked up my phone, dialing Michael with trembling fingers. When he answered, my heart was pounding in my chest. Michael, we need to talk. I've made a decision. We agreed to meet at a neutral place, a quiet park where we had spent many happy moments in the early days of our marriage. Sitting across from him on that park bench, the autumn leaves swirling around us, I told him about my decision. I'm leaving, Michael. I need to find myself again, to be someone I can look at without feeling ashamed. My voice was firm, but inside, I was breaking. Michael didn't argue or plead. He simply nodded, the sadness in his eyes a reflection of my own. I understand, Ellie. I hope you find what you're looking for. We parted ways that day, not with a dramatic farewell, but with a quiet acceptance of the end of our journey together. It was the most painful and honest conversation I had ever had. As I walked away, I felt a strange mix of relief and despair. I was stepping into a new chapter of my life. But at what cost? The love I had for Michael, the life we had built together, was now a part of my past, a chapter closed with a heavy heart. But life, as I had learned, was full of unexpected twists. Just as I was coming to terms with my decision, fate threw another curveball my way. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a message from a number I hadn't seen in a while. It was James. "Ellie, I need to see you. It's urgent." His message read. My heart skipped a beat. James, the man who had been the catalyst for so much change in my life, was back. And with his return, a new set of questions arose. What did he want? Why now, when my life was already in turmoil? I stood there, a woman at a crossroads, torn between the past and an uncertain future. The path I would choose was unclear, but one thing was certain. My story was far from over. This is Chapter 5 of a 6-part short story. If you are enjoying this story, why not subscribe to the Romance Diaries, where you can enjoy other stories of love, romance, heartache, revenge, cheating and betrayal, and by clicking on the notification bell at the same time we can let you know every time we bring out a new video. Please stay tuned for the final chapter, Chapter 6. For 32 years my affair was a hidden thrill, but unexpected news transformed it into a burden of guilt, leading me to confront the consequences of a lifetime of choices. Chapter 6. 32 years of having an affair becomes 32 years of guilt after some unexpected news. Life, as I've come to learn, is a masterful storyteller, weaving tales of joy and sorrow with a hand that never trembles. For 32 years I lived a story that was more fiction than reality, a tale of love and betrayal, of passion and guilt. When I received that message from James, my heart was a tumult of emotions. After leaving Michael, I was like a ship adrift in a stormy sea, battered by waves of regret and uncertainty. And now James, the man who had once been my anchor, was reaching out to me again. I agreed to meet him, a decision that felt like stepping back into a past I had tried to leave behind. We chose a quiet cafe, a place devoid of memories of our previous encounters. When I saw him, something in my chest tightened. He was older, the lines on his face deeper, but his eyes still held that familiar spark. "Ellie," he began, his voice laced with a nervous energy. "I've been meaning to tell you something. Something important." I braced myself, expecting declarations of undying love or plans for a future together. But what he said next was something I could never have anticipated. "Ellie, I'm sick. The doctors, they say I don't have much time left." The world around me seemed to freeze. James, the embodiment of passion and vitality, was now facing his mortality. The news hit me like a physical blow, leaving me breathless. We talked for hours, about his illness, about the years we had spent apart, and about the love that had never really faded. But as he spoke, a profound sense of guilt washed over me. For 32 years, I had indulged in an affair that now seemed so trivial in the face of life's ultimate finality. James, ever the optimist, tried to lighten the mood. "Hey, we had some good times, didn't we?" he said with a wistful smile. But the smile didn't reach his eyes, which were filled with a sadness that mirrored my own. As we parted that day, a part of me knew it would be the last time I would see him. The final chapter of our illicit love story was drawing to a close, and there was no happy ending in sight. In the weeks that followed, I was haunted by memories of our time together. Each stolen moment, each secret rendezvous, now seemed like a thread in a tapestry of deceit. My affair with James, once a source of exhilarating escape, had become a source of profound guilt. I tried to immerse myself in my newfound freedom, but the freedom tasted bitter. I had left my husband for a chance to find myself, but all I found was a deepening sense of loneliness and regret. Then, one rainy afternoon, as I sat in my quiet, empty apartment, the phone rang. It was James's number, but the voice on the other end was not his. It was his wife, a woman I had never met, but who had been an invisible presence in our affair. "Ellie, James passed away last night," she said, her voice steady but heavy with grief. "He wanted you to know." The news of his death was a crushing blow, the final nail in the coffin of my guilt. For 32 years I had lived a lie, and now the man I had shared that lie with was gone, leaving me alone with the weight of our shared sins. In the days that followed, I attended James's funeral, a silent observer in the back row, watching his wife and children, a family shattered by loss. I realized the full impact of our actions. We had not only betrayed our spouses, but also ourselves. As I stood by his grave, the rain mingling with my tears, I felt a deep sense of remorse. James and I had shared a love that was passionate, yes, but it was also selfish and destructive. And now, I was left with the memories and the consequences. The weeks turned into months, and I found myself drifting through life, a ghost haunted by the past. The affair had left a void in my heart, one that could not be filled with empty freedoms or newfound solitude. One day, as I walked through the park, I passed by the bench where Michael and I had decided to part ways. I sat down, lost in thought. Our marriage, flawed and imperfect, had been real, grounded in shared dreams and struggles. But the affair with James, it was like a dream, a fantasy that had crumbled under the harsh light of reality. Sitting there, amid the falling leaves, I made a decision. It was time to face the truth, to confront the consequences of my choices. I had lived in the shadows for too long, and it was time to step into the light, however harsh it might be. As I walked away from the park, a sense of determination settled in my heart. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and possibly more heartache. But it was a road I had to walk, a journey I had to undertake to find redemption and, perhaps, a chance at true happiness. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. My story was far from over. It was a new beginning, a chance to right the wrongs and to learn from the past. And as I took those first steps towards a new chapter, I felt a glimmer of hope, a faint light in the darkness of my guilt.